Hi, everybody. I'm Alix Paul, your moderator for this event, and I have Simon Benjamin from New AG, Dan Preece from Connexin, and Gary Adams from Northumbrian Water, and we're going to talk today about utility LoRaWAN. And, well, you know what? Why don't we have each of you tell us what you believe utility LoRaWAN is and tell a little bit about your company and how it fits into that, and then we'll continue with our conversation. So please, Dan.
Yeah, sounds good. So I'm Dan Preece. I'm the Vice President of Water and Utilities for Connexin. So I look after the smart meter rollout and the deployment of critical infrastructure across the UK to connect water meters in the environment. I just want to stop and explain why I'm talking about tech, baby, and why you might have seen some of our audience members wearing t-shirts like this and trying to storm the stage earlier. Basically, we have a challenge, and we as Connexin are trying to lobby the government to ensure that LPWAN, and in particular LoRaWAN, gets the focus it needs and the drive it needs from government level down. So while we're talking in this discussion all around utility networks and rollout of infrastructure, it's essential that we link utilities and councils together to drive the LPWAN movement. An example is, me and Gary sat on a panel discussion only 2 weeks ago, where it's a large conference in the UK where thousands of attendees arrived down in London. And it's called Connected Britain. Well, that's a critical thing. Connected Britain is driven by, in the UK, fiber, or FTTP, and 5G. Nothing about LPWAN or LoRaWAN. We did a panel discussion. The room was quite empty and everybody looked at us a little bit blank. So the idea of us shouting about it, holding our signs up, and petitioning is to lobby the government, certainly in the UK, to drive LPWAN as a critical infrastructure level connectivity across the UK.
For smart cities, municipalities, and the like.
For smart cities in particular, yes, because the governments will filter down to local authorities and councils. They're not even aware of the technology. We spend an awful long time trying to push the technology rather than pushing the solutions and the benefits, which we can talk about in this panel today.
That's an excellent point also, because a lot of people do tend to lose sight between the tech and the solution. The solution is what counts, you know? So Gary, you were also on this panel, and how does your organization fit into the utility low power wireless ecosystem?
I lead our smart transformation program and metering operations. So my team are responsible for installing just over 1 million meters by 2030 across our area. So we have 4.5 million customers in the UK to whom we supply clean water and deal with dirty water. So those meters will use the Connexin LoRaWAN network. And we're looking at all the other use cases where we can use our endpoint connected devices, river quality monitoring, sewer flooding, and devices like that connected through the network to bring data into our organization to drive insight and opportunity.
Well, there's a lot of moving parts in there. I mean, by definition, right? Simon, what are your thoughts? And where does your company fit into all of this?
Yes, so my name is Simon. I'm heading the LoRaWAN projects for NEW. NEW is a regional provider for water, heat, and electricity in the Lower Rhine region. We have around 450,000 customers for electricity and more than 100,000 customers for water. So we are not the biggest, but also not the smallest utilities. We are not the first ones and not the last ones using LoRaWAN in Germany. And LoRaWAN is something that we use as a fundamental pillar for the overall digitalization of business operations. Yeah. We need to digitalize, we want to digitalize, and we can digitalize. And LoRaWAN helps us to really get data from points where we have been blind before. So what we do is we want to build a LoRaWAN network in the entire region with an estimate of 400 to 500 LoRaWAN outdoor gateways to really support our core business, and that's metering. So metering and sub-metering. And by doing so, we create a very large and redundant network that has so much capacities that we'll never max them out. If at one point we are at a level where we say, well, we have too much traffic on our gateways. I think that would be good news, but at the moment can't foresee that, so that's why it's very natural for us to offer these capacities to other partners to enable them again to digitalize. And that is for us as a public utilities company in the region also our core mission, that we care about our region and that we have a certain commitment to achieve higher goals than just selling energy. So, and for that, we need to collaborate with cities as well to really just overcome these challenge of climate change and reducing CO2 emissions.
Well, you know, that's when you think about it from that aspect of the moving, you know, parts and the complexity and how many things are interactive, I think let's step back a second and what I like to call look at the whole elephant. You know, I think the IoT is like the blind men and the elephant. They've got a piece of the IoT and it looks like that from their perspective, but there's this entire other ecosystem. And so when we think about things like utility IoT, it's a different layer, but it interacts with the higher layers. So that metering solution may be tied into some other city-oriented water management. You know, oh, we want to keep track of what's going on for a watershed issue. So how do you see that layering of smart city infrastructures, utility wireless LAN, and then that consumer need, that municipal management need, that city manager need? How do you see that all playing together?
Well, I think the UK might be slightly different to Europe in this sense, whereas the municipality within Europe holds the water and the gas and the energy connectivity, whereas Gary at Northumbrian Water is a prime example of the partnership that we have for the next 15 years to roll out 1.6 at least million meters, water meters. That's great, and that's a really good use case, and it's an anchor tenancy to deploy dense infrastructure. Now these meters are below ground, 0.75 meters roughly, or circa. To connect those meters, you have to build a very dense network. That dense network for the anchor tenancy of the water utility enables additional upsell solutions on top. But the isolated way that the UK market operates is that the water utilities are larger regional rollout, so we're deploying on a large scale, which incorporates an awful lot of municipalities within. So we're rolling this out, then there's a barrier, almost, between the water utility and the rest of the players in the local authority market within that regional area. So how it can blend is basically doing this, which we're trying to do, is lobbying through the government to say, enable connectivity and LP-WAN to be at the forefront of these local authorities' minds for us to enable a smarter, brighter, cleaner, greener city, which they want. They just don't know they've got a network established in their location to develop on that. So this is how we construct this. And we build it from the layer of the anchor tenancy with water utilities upwards. Now, there is an opportunity within the water utilities as well, and I'll let Gary explain a little more on working with water quality sensors or working with flood prevention and monitoring that and bringing that data into a single pane of glass so we can analyze and proactively monitor what we're doing with working with the water utility. So there's almost two plays here with the infrastructure running along that side. So breaking down that barrier in between and enabling the councils to utilize the network infrastructure is a critical part of development for LP-WAN.
I agree completely. I mean, Gary, what are your thoughts on that? The whole aspect of, here you are putting in this smart network, you can do other things with this smart network, but obviously you have to have security, you have to be able to perform. What are your thoughts on that whole aspect of mixing the industrial, community, utility IoT with everything else?
So I see this as multi-layered, so that the foundation is the network. That allows us to collect the data from our endpoints. The second layer is the data that we receive, so huge amounts of data, exponential growth in the amount of data we collect. So as an example, from our traditional meters, we read those meters once every 6 months manually. We collect 2 data points a year. In a smart world, we collect 8,500 data points per meter per year. So across 70,000 meters we've got connected to our network, we're already consuming 40 million data points a month, okay? So all that data brings opportunity and challenge. The next level is operationalization. What do we do with that? How do we draw out points of interest? How do we drive value for the organization and for our customers? moving from a very reactive experience, a customer receives a bill and contacts us, that bill is really high, to a very proactive experience where within a few days of something happening in the home, we can proactively tell the customer what's happening. The next layer on top of that then is how we aggregate all this together to drive social value. So this, in the UK, is about open standards and open data and data sharing. So how can we share all that rich information we're collecting from our meters, from our rivers, from our sewers, with wider data with our local municipalities, with other services and other industries, to bring that together to understand the bigger picture, which drives bigger social value across the board. And then on top of all of that sits AI, okay? So how do we really draw value from this data? There's a real risk that the more data you get, and by 2030 we'll be consuming around 1 billion readings per year just from meters. How do you distinguish what we call noise from value-adding points of interest? So really leveraging the opportunity around AI to really sift through all that data for you to flag the things that are important to take action on. And not only for us as an organization to take action on, to drive consumer behavior change, to drive community change, but also to drive wider industry change as well by bringing all that data together.
Exactly. Well, you could even go even further and say, once you get to that level, obviously then come privacy and security issues, because if I'm a beverage company, I can say, hey, they're drinking more water in this neighborhood than they are in this neighborhood, and my sales here are X and my sales here are Y. Maybe I should have a contest to get people to drink more of my stuff because they're drinking too much house water or something like that. I mean, that's the slightly negative, but on the positive, it could be also, let's check, consumption, tie it into the watersheds and all. What are your thoughts on that whole integration of the infrastructure with everything else, Simon?
Yeah, I think that's a big challenge, and we are at the early stages of this. As a public utilities company, we are known to be more on the conservative side of the organization as Spectrum, same like a city. So we used to obviously work a lot in silos with different systems, own meters, own platforms, where often the other departments did not know what others are really doing, what kind of data they have, how they do that, and why they do that. And when we started to collect data with LoRaWAN, at first the main purpose was to digitalize the billing system. As you said, we needed the data once every month for billing system, and everything in between was completely unknown and for a long time irrelevant. Yeah? We had the volumes, we had forward and backward temperatures, but that's for billing. They said, well, we just don't need that yet. Yeah, so we collected a mass of data and started to playing a little bit around with it and put them together in context with other data from open weather data, behavioral data. Then we grouped them into smaller buildings and sectors just to see how districts can behave and what makes them change patterns. So and that was the moment where other departments paid attention and said, well, that's interesting. If you can do that, can you do this? Can you do that? Or do you have this kind of data? So with that showing of what you can take out of the data that you really collect over the longer period, and this new amount of data, that is a level that we just haven't been used to. So it is a lot of process change, but also cultural change to open up and share data and request data. And in the end, the ideal would be, of course, to put them all into one single platform as one single source of truth. But that is something where we are just not there yet. And that needs a much stronger business case across the entire company. So it is, at the moment, a little bit of a bottom-up process where we show and tell what is possible, compare that with other departments. But in the end, I think to have that overall structure where you have one big data lake or whatever it may be, that is something that needs a big decision to transform the entire infrastructure.
I think that's important, right? Because it's not just about collecting the data, it's about analyzing for proactive insight and then making a decision off the back of that. If you're going to just collect data from different data sources, and to Gary's point, from a water quality sensor and a flood level monitoring and a gully sensor and a water meter, that's great, but it's about what you do with that data to benefit the customer. Yeah. And that extends into the smart city play, right? You're a consumer of water and you live in a city with the municipality or water utility embedded on a layered approach to that. So it's just as important to know what your next municipality is doing or what your behaviors are like in comparing city to city, but it's also what benefit is to the consumer themselves. for example, it's great to say I can install a bunch of air quality sensors on the infrastructure that we've built.
Yeah, but what do you do
We can do
with
that in Newcastle on the back of Northumbrian Water's network that we're building. But what does that mean? So an air quality sensor doesn't mean we're just going to install and get some revenue. What it means is we can then inform the constituents of that town, city, municipality who've got, let's say, asthma. Well, you can leave the house between 2 and 5 because we're measuring traffic flow, we're measuring air quality sensing, and a bunch of other maybe pre-existing data to give you that overall and holistic view of the air is clean today. You can leave the house without any issues. And that's where we start moving into the benefits from a smart city perspective.
Well, that's an excellent point, Dan, because when you think about that whole aspect of the integration, how it's the hierarchy of the information, that all of that has to be discussed and negotiated, because we have just a little bit more time to have one last thing out of everybody, because I wanted you to talk a little bit about, we've talked a little bit, you mentioned air sensing, we're heading in that direction. Water meters are kind of the low-hanging fruit. What segment, I'm going to let Simon lead this time, what segments do you see are going to be integrated into utility IoT next? Like, what do you think is going to be the next thing to be IoTized within a municipality?
I think the biggest potential definitely is for us in the area of energy management and facility management. Because for once, we have a lot of internal use cases in this area, and that's something that is in our own interest in the future as well. Although we do sell heat and energy, it is in our long-term interest to reduce the overall consumption, to become CO2 neutral at one point. And that is still for some companies, the idea of reducing your core business is unusual in the beginning. So the overall goal is that if we help our customers and consumers and partners to better understand where they can increase operational efficiencies, then it is better for us for the network, then our network will be better balanced. We reduce CO2 emissions, and that is, I think, for us as a utility provider, the biggest way into collaborations with other cities and partners.
Good point. What do you think about migrating forward, Gary?
So I think there's two key things for me in terms of bringing all this together from a home perspective. So thinking about a smart home, firstly from the angle of how does an individual contribute to the overall UK-wide aims around net zero. So that's really hard for a householder to understand how they can individually contribute to this huge thing which is net zero. So being able to provide them with all the insight and opportunity around what they're doing in the home, electric vehicles, solar panel charging, water reuse, water use, gas, electricity, thinking all those things together along with other utilities, providing them insight and opportunity to understand the contribution they're making, but also how they can increase that contribution over time. And then the second use case in terms of smart homes is in the UK, we currently have a cost of living crisis. For a large proportion of our families in the UK, they're struggling to operate on their incomes and manage their daily household bills. So how do we bring all of that insight and data together to allow them to understand the complexities of all of the things that they consume in the house? That's really hard right now. They have a banking app, they have an app for the supermarket, they'll have an app for energy, probably a different app for gas and electricity. Some will have an app for water. That creates a huge amount of effort to bring all that together. So with data becomes power, right, and opportunity. So how can we help them bring all that together in a single space to inform decision making and ensure that they can drive best value for the money they have in the household?
Well, it really is going to be a big question and a lot of negotiations, I think, between everybody involved to make sure everyone gets what they need without depriving someone of what they also need. Now, you get last lick, Stan, because we're almost out of time, but there's just enough time for you to, you could shake the sign some more if you like.
I will do at the end. I'm going to get everybody to stand up and sort of protest to the audience here. But the next thing coming into this IoT LP-WAN drive for me is interoperability. I speak to a number of the vendors out there and the partners out there, that it's so important that we can bring legacy data, LP-WAN data, and future data, however that is, in whatever form we see in the future through satellite connectivity, which could be proprietary or not, through NB-IoT, through LoRaWAN, through Sigfox and other LPWAN technologies, and also legacy BMS systems in buildings. We're looking at smart building solutions. First question comes back, well, how can you integrate my existing data? You're going to bring this great LoRaWAN solution, but how are you going to bring that data through and analyze that along with it? So it's all about interoperability for me, and I see that next best thing coming through and driving a real success story across utilities who've got stranded assets that are connected via a proprietary system that nobody can connect to. So just on that point, it's not just interoperability in terms of asking the vendors out there to create a gateway, that it also enables future technologies or emerging technologies to connect into the same gateway. It's also around communicating with potential, let's call them partners, but they could be competitors in our space, to work together to deliver the data for the customer. So interoperability has got to be the next thing.
Well, and there is a lot between now and then that we have to sort out to get there. But thank you all, gentlemen. I think we had a great conversation. Too bad we're running out of time. I'd love to continue this, but thank you so much for taking the time at this busy event to sit this panel and talk to our audience. And I appreciate you all for taking the time to listen about utility LoRaWAN. But that was great.